Welcome back to Beyond the Hyphen, where we explore the crossroads of politics, diplomacy, and global affairs. In this episode, we're taking it back to where I'm from, Howard County, Maryland, joined by Miss Jessica Nichols, Board Chairperson of Columbia Community Care, elected official on the Howard County Democratic Central Committee, and Howard County Teacher of the Year. From her community to her students, Ms. Nichols has dedicated her time and efforts toward building a more inclusive and service-oriented home for all Marylanders. In this episode, we'll dive into what equity looks like in education, her role as a community cornerstone, and the journey that she's taken as a public servant. Ms. Nichols, it's so great to have you here with us.
I'm super excited to be here this evening. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so I'm so excited to sit down and talk with you about your journey as an educator, as a teacher, as an elected official, and just someone who many in the community rely on. I want to start with your story as an educator, though. Can you talk a little bit about your start as a teacher, your approach to teaching kids, and what being a teacher means to you?
Sure. I didn't start out this life thinking I was ever going to be a teacher. I thought I was going to be an oil and gas attorney living in New York City. And the the thing that happened was life. Um, I became a mom when I was 21 years old. And in looking at my little guy, I wanted to change what I wanted to do. Being an attorney would mean that I would be working at least 80 to 100 hours a week. And I didn't want to take that kind of time away from my son. So I started asking myself questions, things like, well, what can I do that combines my love of law and justice with something that's extremely practical? And so in my journeys, I contacted my former social studies teacher, Mr. Paul Copies. He taught eighth grade social studies. And I said, I'm on this journey and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And he said, you've always been really great with kids. Why don't you come on down to my classroom and we can talk in person? And so I went down and he happened to be teaching US history. And he goes, hey, we're learning about World War I. And this is my friend, Jessica, and she's going to teach you today. And he sat down and I, I literally panicked on the inside because I was like, I'm sorry, you want me to do what with who? I had no lesson plan. I didn't even know what a lesson plan was. Um, but we started looking at the causes of World War I because that was always my favorite. And by the end of that class period, I was like, I think I could do this with my life. And so it was the best, worst thing someone could have done is just throw me in the deep end. But it also helped me to really solidify what I wanted to do. So I then went to the University of Maryland and I had this passion. Now I was going to teach social studies and I was going to teach social studies in high school. And so the rest of the story writes itself. Became a high school teacher. And my first year of teaching was 2001. And this is where my educational philosophy really started to solidify. I know a lot of people will tell you, oh, I knew exactly what my philosophy was going to be the second I thought I was going to be a teacher. And that's great for them. And I don't doubt that at all. But I had to grow into my philosophy and the trial by fire, which was teaching on September 11th while being extremely brand new, um, really helped me to remember and to always put the students' humanity in the forefront of everything that I do. Because we were in that classroom and we had just watched the second plane crash into the World Trade Center. And my students were panicking. And I knew that something was wrong. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew something happened on purpose because planes don't fly into buildings like that. And so I was paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. And I just remember looking at the faces of these kids who needed me to be bigger than I was, and they needed to be seen and they needed to be heard. And so I turned off the TV and I just listened to them. I learned you don't promise kids things that you don't know if you can deliver or not,
Mhm.
but you can always give them your time and you can always give them your attention. And you can always make sure that they are heard and they are understood. And that formed a key component of my educational philosophy. I firmly believe that in order to teach children well, you have to know them well. And you can't get to know them if you don't give them time to be in their own space, in their own skin. And you can't get to know them well if you don't have dialogue with them. You don't ever get to know who they are if you don't hear what they're interested in. They don't get to know and feel comfortable with you unless they know what you are interested in. And it's through building classroom community that we create a space in which young people can understand how integral they are to society. And so that's my educational philosophy. We build community to help students to be able to find their passion, to find safety, and to learn how to fly.
Would you say, from the educator's standpoint, during times of crisis, as a student in my generation, we experienced the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
It hit right away. I was in my last year in elementary school. I was going to graduate. I know a lot of high school seniors didn't get to have their commencement. And I can kind of draw that parallel to 9/11. Would you say during these times of crisis, uncertainty, that the teacher student relationship is really brought out, and how the mutual understanding is sort of demanded to be streamlined, or sort of um, there for each other before the crisis even happens?
100%. If you don't have those very, very close bonds and those close relationships with educators, then the messages that you get in times of trauma can compound, and then students don't have outlets, right? They don't have people that they can trust. If you really think about it, the lessons that we learned in the pandemic are very antisocial lessons, right? Number one, you never know who's going to be sick. So you have to make sure you're distanced from everyone.
Mhm.
Well, if we're physically distanced from everyone, it makes it very hard to connect emotionally with anyone. And that lesson of always being wary and pushing people to the side, we can see how the ramifications of that leads to separation within our society. And young people are now trying to get past those lessons they learned in the pandemic in order to form those bonds. But those bonds are really hard to retie once they've been severed like that. And it's into that fray that the educator can play the largest role. During the pandemic, and when we were online teaching, I worked really hard in order to at least form a community as best as you can when your students are about that big, right? But I would have open hours where kids could just come in, and some of the kids that I made the most bonds, the deepest bonds with, were the kids that would just come into open hours, and it was say anything time. You could come in, we could talk about school, you could talk about anything that was on your heart. I had students that came in and played their violin for me, and we had a kid that wanted to sing Disney karaoke, so we sang Disney karaoke. But what happened with those relationships is the very next year when we came in person, those were the kids who came into my classroom, and even though I wasn't their teacher anymore, it was that community that we had started building that they were craving. And so that's the major work, the reparation of that harm that was necessary, right? We did not know what COVID was. We barely knew how it was spread. and we didn't know the extent of it. And so that trauma, that rendering apart, probably saved millions of lives. But that fracturing of community is one of the things that we are desperately working to rebuild. And so that does make it more difficult when we have things like digital media and computers, and that's how people normally would connect. Um, During the pandemic, it makes it more difficult when those things are still available for young people to be able to connect in real life. And there were some skills that were lost. Skills like how do you make a phone call to a business? How do you address adults that you've never met before? I'm still helping kids know, how in the world do you write an email? How do you ask somebody for things?
Mhm.
But we're slowly building those bonds again. And young people are adaptable. So that adaptability is bringing people together. And I love that.
Yeah, I can remember when we all came back to in-person schooling, a lot of us were hesitant to take off our masks, not because, we were afraid that there were going to be sick people around us, but because we didn't feel comfortable,
Mhm.
showing people what we really looked like just because there was this physical separation. And I think this separation, even nowadays, is rampant, not because of a pandemic, but because of certain systemic inequalities or ways that people interpret each other. But to stay on the lighter side, we can talk about the passion that you bring, Miss Nichols, in and out of the classroom, or just any teacher in general, has been something that students are very sensitive to. And I think for you, it's clearly meant something to them. You were named Howard County Teacher of the Year. You were a Maryland State Teacher of the Year finalist. Can you talk a little bit about what that recognition meant to you, either personally or professionally?
Oh, 100%. Um, so the usual process when someone goes to become teacher of the year is that, you as the candidate typically gather a group of people who will nominate you for that. And then you go through the process. My my process was completely different. And I think this is why it meant so much to me. I was not included in the process at all. Five of my kiddos got together and they applied for this for me. And they actually looped in my daughter because they needed my resume. They didn't know how to get it without asking me. So they asked my daughter to be a secret agent and to get my resume. And when I was notified that I was a semifinalist, and once I found out that this came from my students, it gave me it gave me this sense that the students really got who I was as a person. The students really understood how much I deeply just love them. And that's why I do what I do. I am a teacher because I love students. I do. You guys are the first thing on my mind in the morning. You guys are the last thing on my heart when I go to bed. When you guys have something big coming up, oftentimes I'll dream about it. It's interesting, but professionally though, it has meant it has meant the world. Um, to be recognized as the Howard County Teacher of the Year is one of the top honors that you can receive as a teacher. And every day I'm humbled that I get to be the representative from Howard County on the state level. We at my school, we had not had a Howard County Teacher of the Year for 20 years before I was named Howard County Teacher of the Year. And in our county, we did not have an MSDE state finalist for 7 years. And so just being able to bring those honors home to our county and to be able to go out amongst the other places in the state as a state finalist brings recognition to this beautiful county that I love and I'm proud to call home. So it means so much. I still am in contact with the five kiddos that nominated me for Teacher of the Year. Uh, when I am in their cities that they are going to school, and we typically will meet up for lunch or for dinner, and they send me emails letting me know how they're doing. And it's the most you can hope for as a teacher, that when you guys fly away, that you guys look back and let us know how you're doing from time to time. So it's just meant the world to me. And I'm not a crier, but I did cry.
Definitely something worth shedding a tear for. Now, I want to shift to a broader scope on education and what it encompasses. We've seen how it's been a challenge for many educators to deal with the pressure of navigating systemic challenges that might have, been left for them even before they became a teacher. I'm curious what you see as the biggest challenge that educators face today, especially in terms of equity and access.
Whew, that is a very heavy question, and I'm here for it. One of the heaviest lifts that we ask of our educators is to navigate the many things that our students need while dealing with public demonization and lack of funding. And I feel like those two things um, loom equally for educators. With a lack of funding, that means that you have an increased workload. Um, Fundamentally, we can't look at an educator's workload as the same as almost any other profession. As an educator, you make more decisions within 1 hour than a surgeon makes within an entire surgery, literally second by second. So the educator's job is not just intellectually taxing, but you also love the students. So they live in your heart. It's emotionally taxing. And so when you're adding more to the educator's workload by expanding class sizes in order to deal with budgetary issues, you are exponentially adding time that, quite frankly, a lot of educators just don't have.
Mhm.
And so that gets exacerbated in schools in which there's lower socioeconomic status. Typically, the teaching force in schools that have lower socioeconomic status, they typically are younger, they're typically more inexperienced. And with experience, I've been doing this since 2001. So I can walk into any classroom and I can navigate behaviors very well. I've navigated behaviors all over the state. And you can contextualize those behaviors because you have more tools in your toolbox. And while new educators will get there, they 100% will get there. These are things that you can't be taught in a classroom. You have to learn the longer you're around people, right? And the longer you're around students. So for young educators that are trying to learn their craft while being piled on with more and more work, it creates, and as the needs increase because of things like the pandemic, right? All of that creates a pressure cooker in which we tend to lose our youngest teachers. Before they get the tools in their toolbox, they're leaving. And so that creates an even larger snowball. So that definitely is one of the largest issues, and I think that is the heaviest lift for educators.
Absolutely. Yeah, the impact of things like funding cuts for teachers, salaries, resources, they don't only impact the teachers too, they trickle down and impact the students. And I know many students have taken issue and taken initiative to speak out about these certain topics that they're passionate about. But being a teacher is just one small part of who you are. Let's talk a little bit about your community work, your nonprofit work with Columbia Community Care. I know you chair the board of that organization. What has being a part of that initiative meant to you, and how would you describe the impact it's had on people since its founding?
Well, it's been one of the best organizations that I've ever been a part of, because we directly help people, and we directly help people in several ways. We are most well known for our food program. We started, well, let me rewind. We started in 2020 with our executive director and founder, Erica Strauss Chavaria, who was trying, she's an educator who was trying to help her kids. As COVID loomed, one of the things where when you work in schools that are very food insecure, dependent on schools to eat, one of the things that looms large is, how do my children eat when they're not at school? So her call to action was a Facebook post in which she basically said that she volunteers to drive food to students if they close schools, who's with her. And of course, me being a teacher, I was like, I'm there, tell me what I can do to help. And we started crowdsourcing food at feeding locations around the county where people would go to pick up their school lunch or school breakfast. We had tables where they could also pick up groceries and staples. From that, we have expanded. We now have 3 feeding sites where people on Saturday can come and they can pick up a whole range of things, from diapers to staples that, like rice and flour and maseka uh and feminine hygiene products, things you can use to clean your home. You can go on Saturday to one of the 3 feeding sites, and then we also have a delivery service that delivers. The net impact of that is that we have fed over 150,000 people in Howard County
Wow.
through since 2020. But the deeper thing that we've done with our feeding program is we've lifted the lid on the face of food insecurity here in Howard County. For most people in the country, they tend to think of people who are food insecure as people who don't have gainful employment, or people who are already on the system.
Mhm.
And while that is true, in Howard County, many people who are food insecure are ALICE families. And ALICE is an acronym. It stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, but Employed. And these are people who are working 40 hours a week, and they make too much money to qualify for social services and for our safety net programs, but they don't make enough money to successfully live here in Howard County without having to make the hard choice between keeping the lights on or feeding,
Mhm.
right? Keeping the rent paid or the mortgage paid or eating that week. And so we were able to bring those people to light to our county, and it helped us to be able to get certain types of funding to do the work that our social safety net wasn't designed to do, but is desperately needed. We also have we've we have partnered with Stand Mentorship Program and with Push Mentorship Program, and we are through them working with at-risk youth in several of our county schools, um, trying to make sure that any incidents of potential violence gets nipped in the bud, so that these young people have mentors that they know and that they love and see them and understand them. We have a program that we have circles for people who mother, and that's a once a month program where people can come out. Their kids are perfectly taken care of while these people who mother form community with other people who identify as mothering. And that has been an amazing community, um, certainly loving group of people. And we also have a volleyball program that most of the kids that come to our program can't afford things like club volleyball or other club sports. But for a small fee, they can come in and they can learn volleyball. And what that's done is that has opened the doors for these young ladies to make it onto their high school volleyball teams, opening the door for them to become volleyball players in college and giving them access to higher education, which they may not have had access to because of the barrier of money. One thing we're super excited about is in late 2027, early 2028, we will be opening the doors to our community center called The Source, and it will be right there in the Wild Lake neighborhood, and it will be completely free of charge to the community. And we're excited. It's going to be state of the art, over 60,000 square feet, and we're going to have commercial kitchen, we're going to have a recording studio, we're going to have basketball, we're also going to have tutors for kids. So we're excited about providing this space for young people to come in and for the community to come in and to be able to get services that they need. And it will also house our pantry, and that will be the hub for our delivery operations. So super excited. Um, but those are some of the things that Columbia Community Care has done, and I am super proud of the impact we've had here in Howard County.
Yeah, thinking back, it's so amazing how one Facebook post, one social media reach out drew so much attention, and how far, you know, this group of people who want change have brought this initiative and already planning, 3 4 years ahead. um, yeah, CCC is such a powerful example of meaningful intervention for the people who need it most, meeting them where they are. And I think when we talk about government aid, a lot of people struggle to understand the fact that it's not um, as specific to really get down to the grassroots level and tackle the things that people really want to be, you know, mitigated. Um, this may be a broader question, but what's something that along, your time with CCC or even as a teacher that you think could help others seeking to make an impact? Something that you wish maybe that you knew before you entered these sectors.
One thing that I wish that I knew, and one thing that I wish that I fully understood, was that people do have the power to change the things that they see as wrong or missing in their communities. We all are experts in something, right? Oftentimes we deny that we are, maybe we think that that's like being a braggart or something, right? We can't possibly be an expert at this thing. We have to be humble, which there is a space for being humble, but the things that we are experts on, that can be a launching point for making an immense amount of change. And so I wish I had known that. And I wish anyone who hears this episode would understand that when you combine your expertise with the ability to continue to move, you can make great things happen. It's one thing to know a thing really well. It's another thing to know that thing well and put it to action and continuously keep moving. No matter what people say, no matter what people do, you really can change the world. I think about my time at Columbia Community Care. If if someone had just said, wow, it'd be really great if someone would get food to people in need, and that's where it stopped, then we wouldn't be able to have helped as many people as we have helped, and we wouldn't continue to help the people that we can continue to help, right? So you have the power, you have the expertise, put it with action, and you're going to change the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different people out there, and I don't think, like you said, people don't realize, especially in their own circumstances, that they might discourage themselves
Mhm.
when it comes to what they think they can or can't do. Um, but now I want to kind of transition into another side of you, Miss Nichols. You are a elected official. You are a public servant. You serve on the Howard County Democratic Central Committee. You've also recently declared candidacy for a seat on the county council. Can you
Yeah.
maybe just give us a rundown of, what motivated you to enter that space on top of your life as a teacher, what it's been like, and how you see elected office as a continuation of what you do?
Absolutely. So I entered into this space in 2020 when one of my really good friends sent an email to me and said, "Hey, there's an opening for a woman on the Howard County Democratic Central Committee." So, on the Democratic Central Committees around the state of Maryland, we have to have gender balance, right? So, if there is a person who identifies as a female who resigns from a central committee, they can only be replaced by two people. One would be someone who also identifies as female. The other would be someone who is trans female or is gender non-binary, right? The same thing on the male side. You could be non-binary or you could be male to replace another man. And so I was excited. I was like, okay, because I've always wanted to make a difference, particularly in democratic politics. Um, this desire came from me when I was little, from a conversation I had with my grandfather. I had very few conversations with him. Geography was a problem. He lived in New Jersey. I lived in Texas. And this was back before we had cell phones and computers. But the few times I did see him, he once told me that he was one of the very few Democrats in rural Alabama. And I asked him, "Well, Grandpa, why?" And he said, "Well, the Democratic Party cares about people. And if you care about people, you want to be a Democrat." And that just stuck. That stuck in my mind. I think the Democratic Party as a big ticket party I'm sorry, big tent party is filled with so many different people. But one of the people who seem to be missing in the halls of Democratic power are educators. And for a party that believes so deeply in education and training and uplifting, not having the educator's voice in these spaces has been a gaping hole. And so, as an educator, I strive to make sure that I am uplifting parents and I'm uplifting students and the needs of our schools into these spaces. And that's really how I got involved
Mhm.
in watching how our county council has interacted. I believed that I could also do some really good things on the county council. I so that's why I jumped into the race. I am a proud D2 resident. I came here not because I was forced to come to D2. I came to D2 because I really love I really love this district. This district literally has everything in it, from extreme working class folks all the way to super wealthy folks. We have everything that you could ever want in a county you can find right here in D2. We have manufacturing facilities in D2. We're one of the few districts that do still have heavy manufacturing in it. And so the this district is so full of promise and amazing people. And so I believe that I can take my strong ability to organize our community, listen to our community, but also my love for this space. And I can use it in order to do great things for the people, not just here in D2, but as one of the 5 county council people, I will be able to see more than just what we need here, but to also see what we need on the county level.
Yeah, I love how you brought up how you want to address this lack um, lack of teachers, lack of educators in these decision making spaces. And in a previous episode with House Leader Moon, also with Delegate Chow Wu, we discussed, how as a STEM focused individual, he was breaking a barrier just by entering, that space of policymaking, that space of representation. And I think also as a policymaker, as a politician in your work and efforts, I'm sure you've been close in proximity to many of the leaders shaping policy here in Maryland. Can you speak to the relationships that you've had the opportunity to make with other elected officials? Perhaps, you can talk about certain people or just as a big, like you said, big tent family, how you would describe the spirit of this type of work.
Well, I will definitely tell you that we are very lucky here in Howard County. We really do have the best we have the best legislators that represent us in Annapolis. And I'm not saying that because of any other reason that I have personally worked with them, from going to Montgomery County to introduce Natalie Ziegler and Chow Wu to the people of Montgomery County when we got redistricted, and Katie Fry Hester, right? From going over there to knocking on doors here in Howard County for our amazing delegation. They they consistently awe me with how they keep the public trust and how they listen to people, even when it gets hard, right? I've seen Senator Clarence Lamb in spaces where people are asking him tough questions, and he doesn't ever say, "Okay, I have to go, pick up my puppy and run away." No, he stands there and he's accountable, even if people are annoyed with him, right? They are human beings and they are super amazing, but they also want to get it right. People like Delegate Jessica Feldmark, who you turn around a corner at any event, you will see Delegate Jessica Feldmark. And she's there because she wants to be in a space where she understands all of the constituents. And that comes from a space in her heart. People like Natalie Ziegler. I've knocked on doors with Natalie Ziegler, and she is a machine. But not only is she a machine, she actually really cares about her constituents. And I think that's how we are the luckiest here in Howard County. There's not a representative that I can name that doesn't care about doesn't care about us as constituents. Even when I went to Annapolis as the Howard County Teacher of the Year, our delegation was so cute. They were like, "We have to take pictures with you. Look at our Teacher of the Year." They were excited. They were excited about the Howard County Teacher of the Year being able to be in that space. But that just goes to show how they care about our entire county, from those who win awards to those who are just crossing a street. I've seen them leave the House floor to come and greet kids that are touring,
Mhm.
because they want to make sure that they have that touch. So I love our delegation. I have been honored to work with them, particularly when they are running for election or reelection. And I've experienced nothing but the best from our delegation. Our county executive, Dr. Ball, is absolutely amazing. You know, he leads from a space of intellect, and he leads from a space from his heart. And while, all of these people are humans, and there will always be people who will say one thing or another about the decisions that they make, the one thing about all of them is they are always going to have a conversation and listen to what everyone has to say. And in a world where we see representatives and county executives and mayors who, when they get tough questions, they run, we're kind of spoiled here in Howard County because we don't have that happening.
Mhm.
Our elected officials will look at you, they will answer your questions, and they will hear from you. And I love that.
You talked about Senator Lamb. In our episode with Senator Lamb, he talked about how when he was, starting off in politics, being part of the AAPI community, when he walked into the room, 80% of the time he would be increasing the diversity by 100%. And
Mhm.
that in itself is something that tells us that we can't be silent, even if we feel, we're singled out or we're annoying others by, constantly remaining in this consistent state of I'm here, I represent these people, it's my responsibility, and I'm not going to apologize for it. And I think that in Maryland, especially from our local to our national, representatives, we are pretty good with operating and presenting a moral clarity when it comes to what we want to achieve. We can talk about Governor Moore. That would take, hours and hours, but
Yes.
he's just one example of what Maryland is capable of. Um, and I want to address something often overlooked in politics. And I think that's just the genuine human experience, the human side of it. I'm curious, what was a moment for you that stuck out in your journey in politics? Maybe because it was unexpected or inspiring or just downright, memorable.
Wow. I would say one of the moments that stuck out the most to me was in August of last year when I met Vice President Kamala Harris. What stuck out the most to me was, well, first, she is smaller than she appears on TV. I thought she was super tall. But the thing that stuck out to me is when I met her, she literally spoke to me like there was no one else in the room. And she told me, as a member of the Central Committee, what she needed to have happen here in Maryland and what she needed to have happen here in Howard County. The fact that she, who knows everything about the entire country, knew that Howard County had voted for Hogan in times past and how we needed to work to make sure that Angela Also Brooks didn't carry Howard County. Like, who knows all of that about one single county in one state and an entire union? And I was like, wow, this woman really knows her stuff. And we weren't even in Howard County, we were in PG County. And then I got to meet the president of the United States, President Joe Biden. And he shook my hand and he literally spoke to me as if I was a regular person and he was a regular person. And I called him sir, and he goes, no, just call me Joe. Oh, that struck me, but it reminded me that as I'm on this journey, you know, as I'm on this journey to become the county councilwoman from District 2, to always remember to stay in that zone, remembering and always respecting that I'm just the same human being as anybody who I see. Just like President Biden reminded me, hey, just call me Joe, saying we're both human beings. We're both just as respected and loved. Somebody loves both of us, right? And no matter where you go and where you ascend to, it doesn't make you fundamentally better than your neighbor. When I win this seat in 2026, I will be the first educator on the county council. I will be the first Black woman on the county council as well. And so that idea that I will be breaking this barrier gives me a charge to ensure that I remember all of these lessons, but that I also continue to fight. And so those are the things that stood out to me on August 15th, 2024, when I met Vice President Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden.
As someone, so involved in both sectors of education, public service, and now blending those two, together, breaking that barrier, you're in a position to shape how our young folks in our community see their place in school, in civic life. Um, I'm curious what you make of the role that young people have, especially students and those from marginalized communities, what they can do to shape policy and community change? And what's something, you wish more young people knew about what they could do?
So, one thing that I have noticed is that there is an unequal young person presence in the process. Typically, students that come from marginalized communities don't have the access or the throughway to understand how do you navigate to get in touch with the people who make decisions. And so, what I would love to say to young people, particularly young people who come from marginalized populations, is that I would tell them, please get to know what the process is. Who do you address things to? You don't call the president of the United States when there's a stoplight that needs to be put in your community, right? But you also don't call your county council person if the president of the United States deploys troops in a country you don't agree with, right? Really understanding what are your inroads and where do you go for certain things, and then having the understanding that your voice really does matter. I know in Howard County, when you, as young people, come to testify in front of the county council, you go first. I don't know if you noticed that, but they always put students first. And that's because your voices are extremely important. We need to know what young people are thinking and how they're feeling because we understand that you guys are the future. And when your voice is absent from the space, we're not making holistic decisions in the best interest of everybody. So we need to hear you. We need to know what's important to you. We need you to put yourself into the void.
Mhm.
And you can do it in a bunch of different ways. You know, and these are all things that are effective. You can make phone calls. If you're scared to talk to somebody, you know what? Call after hours and leave a voicemail. They listen to them, they record them, and your opinion is still counted. If you're too scared to call and talk to someone, you can send an email. You can actually write out a letter and throw a gold stamp on it and put it in the post office, right? And they'll still deliver it. You can join organizations. And if the organization doesn't exist to address what you need, you can get together a group of people who believe the way you do and push for successful change. But your voice is your power. I think far too often young people believe that, oh, well, I'm not 18 yet. I can't vote. Why should I say anything?
Mhm.
And that's because that's what they've been told. But the truth is, the world stops when young people speak. So use that voice because it's important.
Yeah. And again, it's this system that um, the people who come before the younger generations have built. Um, some of those people build the system keeping our young people in mind. Some people, unfortunately, they don't do that. And I think a lot of, the meaningful initiative that people take is to allow and create these spaces where youth can give their input into systems that they'll inherit one day.
And honestly, that's one of the things I'm the most proud of when it comes to our delegation. Our delegation doesn't hold their internship slots for college students. I'm not knocking people who do, but our delegation listens to young people and they continue to be inspirational. So that's another thing that I love about our delegation, but to elevate the voices of our youth, that is integral to making the kind of change that is sustainable for the long term. It is simply not sustainable to build a system in which we only center the voices of those people who are over the age of 18 without listening to the voices of our young people. Our young people are our future, and to ignore them, to ignore their voices, is to do so at our own peril.
Yeah, for sure. People need to realize and put more intention into including our young folks who by no fault of their own, sometimes don't realize that they have to, be proactive. Um, Before we wrap up, I have one last question.
Okay.
It's a little out there, but go with me. If you could
Okay.
lead a national movement around one cause, something you feel doesn't get enough attention, what might that cause be, and how would you rally people around it?
Mm.
And feel free to take a little time to think about it.
No, it would definitely be around the issue of food insecurity. Um, I would lead a movement to destigmatize food insecurity. I grew up in a single parent home and we were extremely food insecure. I used to call it peanut butter poor, where a lot of times we would have one jar of peanut butter and that would be our only food. And we would take a teaspoon of it at the beginning of the day and we wouldn't eat for the rest of the day and we'd take a teaspoon again when we went to bed. When the peanut butter ran out, we would make water soup and we would literally just take, if there were dandelion greens growing outside, we'd put that in water with salt or whatever seasoning we had in the house, and we would just eat that. My mom was fully employed, but my mom also worked in an environment where she made over minimum wage, so we didn't qualify for social safety net programs, but we couldn't afford to live. And so that's one of the background motivations for me getting involved in the organizations that I have had gotten involved in. But I would start a national movement destigmatizing food insecurity and raising the awareness of what local groups can do in order to crowdsource and replicate the model we have here in Howard County in local communities. Um, I would do so by doing three things. Thing number one is I would launch a campaign to destigmatize food insecurity by having people who grew up food insecure, who were able to conquer that insecurity, and to destigmatize it by having people like Oprah, who grew up impoverished, to be able to say, yeah, I grew up not knowing where my next meal was going to come from, but understanding how important it is to get help, right? And then the second thing that I would do is I would liaise with local governmental officials to help them to understand how they can support movements.
Mhm.
And then I would work with local communities in which they have a great deal of people who are food insecure, helping them to learn what this model looks like and helping them to see how they could yield their power in order to alleviate food insecurity in a way that supports the inherent dignity of people. So that would be the movement that I would run. I think that in the wealthiest country in the world, it is criminal that in some places, as many as 40% of young people are going to bed hungry. Um, in a space in which we have so much, we should not have so many people who aren't able to be fed. Food is a basic human dignity, and we should all have access to basic food.
And just to touch a little bit on that, before we wrap up, I know Governor Moore, he talks a lot about people, even his own mother who worked multiple jobs, but they still lived consistently at or under the poverty line. And, being in that situation where you make a little bit more than what's the threshold to qualify for certain aid programs, but not enough, to be sustainable, um, and live in a dignified way, I think that's just as bad as living at or below the poverty line. And something like food insecurity, for sure, is something that has yet to be figured out as a nation, much less as a global community. But yeah, it's definitely something that we have a lot more work to do. But I think with Columbia Community Care, Maryland definitely has a bright future. Um,
Yeah. And if you think about it, when When children are fed, when people are fed, you have a decrease in student absenteeism, which means that students are able to be in school, right? When they are fed, they're able to learn because a hungry child is so involved in that basic struggle to survive that they're not listening to the glories of calculus. They don't really care about that if they're hungry, right? So in places in which there's access to free breakfast and free lunch for students, you have less absenteeism, you have lowered amount of student disciplinary issues, less fighting, less violence, higher student attendance, and higher student achievement, which then gives them a building block to go launch into a brighter future for themselves. And that's just at school, right? So, definitely food insecurity, if we can resolve that, then we are guaranteeing that this next generation that grows up healthy and holistic and also able to pursue whatever their dreams are in this world. That's the kind of world that I think we should all want to live in.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a very, um, straightforward but optimistic as well approach to our issues. Miss Nichols, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's been incredibly meaningful to hear your reflections from the heart that you bring into your classroom, to your students, to the work that you do in your community. We're really grateful that you took the time to be a part of this conversation, and we're really excited to follow the continued impact of your leadership here in Howard County and beyond.
Well, thank you, Mark, so much for having me. And I am extremely excited and I can't wait to listen to this episode and the episodes to come.
That was an incredible conversation with Miss Jessica Nichols of Howard County, Maryland. From grassroots organizing to shaping statewide impact, her insight was nothing short of inspiring. And I hope you found something to carry with you, whether it's a new idea, a challenge to act, or just a simple reminder of the power of people-led change, no matter the age. Until then, stay bold, stay curious, keep building forward. This was Mark Lee, and I'll see you on the next one.